You want to know what really happened? I'm going to tell you the whole truth because honestly, I don't care anymore who knows. I'm Skylar, I'm 29, and 3 weeks ago my husband walked out on me while I'm 8 months pregnant. And apparently everyone thinks I'm the bad guy here. Let me back up. Frank and I have been together since college, married for 4 years now, and we live in this decent little place in Dallas that we're still paying way too much rent for. But whatever. He does something with supply chain management that sounds important, but basically means he sits at a desk all day. And I work freelance, doing web design, when clients actually pay me, which isn't often enough lately. Here's what you need to understand about me and Frank. I've always been the fun one in our relationship. I'm the one who keeps things interesting, who makes him laugh, who prevents us from becoming one of those boring couples who just sits around watching Netflix every night. Back in college, I was in drama club, and I guess I never really stopped performing. Frank used to love that about me. He'd brag to his friends about how clever and creative I was, how I could spin these incredible stories that had everyone hanging on every word. I've always been good at pranks. Not mean ones, just clever little jokes that kept our relationship from getting stale. Like this one time early in our marriage, I convinced him that our apartment complex was getting fumigated and we needed to stay in a hotel for 3 days. I had fake notices and everything. We ended up having this amazing, spontaneous mini vacation, and when I finally told him it was all made up, he laughed so hard he nearly cried. He said it was exactly the kind of thing that made him fall in love with me in the first place. But lately, things have been different. Ever since I got pregnant, Frank's been acting like I'm made of glass, mixed with like I might disappear at any moment. He asks me where I'm going every time I leave the house. He wants to know who I'm texting when I'm on my phone. He's constantly checking in on me like I'm some kind of flight risk instead of his wife who's carrying his baby. And here's the really annoying part. He's gotten way too good at spotting my pranks. It's like he's developed this sixth sense about when I'm messing with him. I'll start telling him some elaborate story, and before I'm even halfway through, he gets this look on his face, like he already knows I'm lying. Where's the fun in that? I put effort into these stories. They're creative, they're detailed, and now he just shuts me down before I can even finish. So yeah, maybe I've had to escalate things a little. If he's going to be harder to fool, then I need to be better at fooling him. That's just natural evolution. It's not my fault he's gotten so paranoid about everything. The pregnancy has been fine, by the way. Nothing dramatic, no complications, just the usual stuff. Frank's been reading all these parenting books and asking me about every little symptom, wanting to feel the baby kick constantly. Sometimes I catch him just staring at my belly with this dopey smile, and honestly, it's sweet, but also kind of suffocating. Like, yes, we're having a baby, but we don't need to make it our entire personality. But the worst part is how he's been treating me lately. 2 weeks ago, I was texting my friend Becca about maybe meeting up for coffee, and Frank saw me typing and immediately wanted to know who I was talking to. When I told him, he asked where we were going, what time, how long I'd be gone. It felt like being interrogated by my dad in high school. "Since when do you need my complete itinerary?" I asked him. "I don't need your itinerary, I just like knowing what's going on with you." But it doesn't feel like caring. It feels like monitoring. And when I told him that, he got all defensive and said he was just trying to be involved. Involved in what? Me drinking a latte with my friend? Then last week he had the nerve to ask me about money. Not in a mean way, but still. Maybe we should talk about the budget before you order more maternity clothes. And do you really need the expensive vitamins when the generic ones are the same thing? Like I've suddenly lost the ability to make basic decisions just because I'm pregnant. I mentioned this to Becca over text, and she said it sounds like he's stressed about becoming a father and taking it out on me, which honestly makes sense. Men get weird when they're scared, and Frank's probably freaking out about supporting a family on what he makes. But that's not my problem. I didn't get pregnant by myself. The breaking point came last Tuesday. We were watching TV after dinner and I was scrolling through my phone, just mindless stuff, and Frank looks over and goes, "Who are you texting now?" Nobody, I said, because I literally wasn't texting anyone, just looking at random posts. You've been on your phone a lot lately. Something about the way he said it, like he'd been keeping track, just set me off. Are you seriously monitoring my phone usage now? I'm not monitoring anything, Sky. I just noticed you seem distracted. Distracted? I'm 8 months pregnant, uncomfortable, tired, and dealing with his constant hovering, but sure, I'm the distracted one. Then he suggested maybe we should communicate more, because he feels like we're not connecting lately. You know what? He was right about one thing. We weren't connecting, but not because of anything I was doing. Every time I tried to be spontaneous or fun, he acted like the world was ending. Every time I wanted some space to breathe, he acted like I was planning to run away forever. That night, after he fell asleep, I started thinking about our whole relationship. Frank used to love that I kept him guessing, that he never knew what I was going to say or do next. Now, he wants me predictable and manageable. Well, too bad. I'm not changing who I am just because we're having a baby. And that's when I got the idea for the perfect prank. Something that would really test how much he trusts me, how well he actually knows me after all these years. Because if he truly knew me, if he really understood who I am, he'd never believe I would actually cheat on him. This would prove once and for all that all his paranoia and suspicion was completely ridiculous. The affair angle was perfect because it was literally the one thing Frank would never expect from me. I've never even looked at another guy since we got together. I barely talk to other men besides like the delivery guy or whatever. But that's exactly what would make it so brilliant. It's so far outside the realm of possibility that any reasonable person who actually knows me would immediately realize I was joking. Plus, Frank's been so paranoid lately, so convinced that something's wrong with me or our relationship. This would prove that his instincts are completely off. He's been treating me like I'm some unpredictable stranger, when really, I'm the same person I've always been. Wednesday, I started planning exactly how I'd tell the story. It needed to be detailed enough to sound real initially, but obviously fake once he really thought about it. The key was finding that sweet spot where I could fool him just long enough to make my point. Then we'd laugh about it, and hopefully he'd realize he's been way too suspicious lately. I was actually excited about it. It felt like the old days when my pranks were appreciated instead of analyzed. This was going to remind him why he fell in love with me in the first place. Thursday evening, I put my plan into action. Frank came home from work looking tired, which was perfect because tired people are easier to fool. I'd been thinking about this all day, getting myself into the right emotional headspace. The key to selling any performance is believing it yourself in the moment. I waited until he'd settled into his usual after-work routine, then I sat down next to him on the couch and got really quiet. When he asked what was wrong, I took a deep breath and said I needed to tell him something important. You should have seen him immediately go into panic mode. What's going on? Is it the baby? No, the baby's fine, I said, and then I started tearing up. Not fake tears. I'm good enough at this that I can actually make myself cry on command. Years of drama training comes in handy. It's about me, about something I did. The look on his face was exactly what I expected, concern mixed with confusion. He reached for my hand and asked me to tell him what happened. So I took another shaky breath and told him I'd been having an affair with someone from work for the past few months. Now, here's the thing. I work freelance from home. I don't have coworkers. Frank knows this. But in the moment, with me crying and acting all guilty, I guess his brain just didn't make that connection right away. What are you talking about? He asked, and I could see him trying to process what I was saying. So I doubled down. Told him I'd been meeting up with this guy, who works for one of my client companies, that things had gotten out of hand, that I wasn't sure if the baby was his. I even threw in details about feeling guilty and confused and not knowing how to tell him, and Frank just sat there staring at me like I'd punched him in the stomach. All the color drained from his face and he stood up and started pacing around the living room. He kept asking me to explain, to tell him exactly what happened, when it started, why I would do this. The whole time I'm thinking, okay, any second now he's going to realize this doesn't make sense. Any second he's going to remember that I work from home, that I barely leave the house except for doctor appointments and grocery runs. Any second he's going to laugh and say, "Okay, Sky, you got me." But he didn't. Instead, he started asking more questions. Wanted to know who the guy was, how I met him, where we would meet up, and the more questions he asked, the more elaborate my story became. I told him the guy's name was Marcus, that he worked for one of my regular clients, that we'd started talking during a project and things escalated. By this point, I'm thinking, Frank, come on, use your brain here. When have I ever mentioned anyone named Marcus? When do I ever work closely enough with clients to develop personal relationships? When do I even leave the house long enough to have an affair? But he just kept standing there, looking destroyed, asking me if I had feelings for this fictional person, asking me what this meant for our marriage. And that's when I realized maybe I'd gotten a little too detailed with the story. The whole point was supposed to be that he'd see through it immediately because he knows me so well. But instead, he was treating this like it was actually happening. So I waited for him to calm down a little, expecting him to start thinking rationally and figure it out. But Frank just kept pacing and asking questions. And honestly, seeing him this upset was kind of satisfying. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because finally, I had his complete attention. No phone, no distractions, no treating me like a fragile pregnant lady. Just pure, focused reaction. But then something shifted. Frank stopped pacing and looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Not angry, not hurt. Empty. Like someone had just sucked all the life out of him. "I need you to be completely honest with me," he said, his voice all flat and scary. "Are you telling me the truth right now?" And this was my moment. This was when I was supposed to start laughing and tell him it was all a joke, that I was just testing him because he'd been so paranoid lately. This was when we'd laugh about how I totally got him, and maybe he'd realize he's been treating me like a stranger instead of his wife. But something about the way he was looking at me made me hesitate. He seemed so broken, so defeated. And a little part of me thought, you know what? Maybe he needs to sit with this feeling for a minute. Maybe he needs to understand what it's like to have someone you love completely doubt you, the way he's been doubting me lately with all his questions and checking up on me. So instead of ending the prank, I doubled down again. "Yes," I said, crying harder now. "I'm telling you the truth. I'm so sorry, Frank. I never meant for this to happen." And that's when something in him just broke. He didn't yell or throw things or storm around the house. He just stood there for the longest time, staring at nothing. Then he went to our bedroom and came back with his gym bag. Wait, hold on. This wasn't part of the plan. He was supposed to get upset, maybe lecture me about trust, then figure out it was a joke. He wasn't supposed to actually pack a bag. "Where are you going?" I asked, and for the first time my panic was real. "I can't be here right now," he said, still in that flat, terrifying voice. "I need to think." "Frank, wait." I started, but he cut me off. Just don't. I can't look at you right now." And then he left. Just walked out the door with his bag and drove away. I sat there for maybe an hour waiting for him to come back or at least call me. This was ridiculous. It was a prank. A joke. How was he not seeing that? I kept expecting my phone to ring with him saying he'd figured it out, that he knew I was messing with him. But my phone stayed silent. By midnight, I was starting to get genuinely worried. I called him 3 times, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted him that we needed to talk, that there were things I needed to explain. Nothing. I barely slept that night. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Frank was supposed to realize I was joking way before it got to this point. The fact that he believed me so completely, that he actually thought I would cheat on him while pregnant with his baby, was honestly kind of insulting. How little does he think of me? Friday morning, I called him again. Voicemail. I texted him that I understood he was upset, but we needed to work this out. Nothing. By Saturday, I was getting angry. Yes, I'd played a prank on him, but his reaction was completely over the top. Walking out on your pregnant wife instead of talking things through? That's not normal behavior. That's not how adults handle problems. It's been 3 weeks now since Frank left, and I'm starting to realize he's not coming back. At first I thought he was just being dramatic, trying to teach me some kind of lesson. but his phone is still going straight to voicemail. He's not responding to any of my texts, and when I drove by his friend Tyler's place where I figured he might be staying, his car wasn't there. Last Monday, I finally broke down and told him the truth over text. Sent him this long message explaining that the whole thing was a prank, that there never was any Marcus, that I was just testing him because he'd been acting so suspicious and controlling lately. I thought for sure he'd call me immediately, apologizing for overreacting and wanting to come home. But you know what I got back? One text. Just one. I know. That's it. 2 words. I know. What the hell does that mean? He knows. If he knew it was a prank, why didn't he come home? Why is he still ignoring me? I've been thinking about it non-stop, and honestly, I'm more confused than ever. So I called Tyler directly yesterday, and he actually answered, which was surprising. But when I asked him where Frank was staying, he got all weird and uncomfortable. Look, Skylar, he said. Frank asked me not to tell you where he is. Are you serious? I'm his wife. I'm 8 months pregnant with his baby. Yeah, and he knows that. But he said he needs space to figure things out. Figure what out? It was a stupid prank that went a little too far. It's not like I actually cheated on him. And the fact that he's hiding from me instead of talking to me like an adult is honestly making me question our entire relationship. Tyler tried to give me some lecture about how Frank is processing everything, and I need to respect his boundaries right now. Boundaries? He's my husband, not some random guy I'm stalking. I have a right to know where he is and when he's coming home. The worst part is that people are starting to talk. Frank's been gone long enough that our friends and neighbors are noticing. When people ask me where he is, what am I supposed to say? That he left because I told him a fake story and he couldn't handle it? That makes me sound crazy. So I've been telling people he's traveling for work, but I don't know how much longer I can keep that up. Especially since I'm getting bigger and more obviously pregnant every day. People are going to expect him to be around for the birth. And honestly, I'm starting to get really angry about this whole situation. Yes, maybe my prank went a little too far. But Frank's reaction is completely disproportionate. Normal people talk through their problems. Normal people don't just disappear for weeks over a misunderstanding. The more I think about it, the more I realize that Frank leaving says way more about him than it does about me. What kind of man abandons his pregnant wife instead of working through their issues? What kind of father-to-be runs away when things get difficult? Maybe this is showing me who he really is. Maybe all those years I thought we were solid, he was just looking for an excuse to bail. Maybe he never really trusted me in the first place. Which would explain why he believed my story so easily. I'm due in 3 weeks, and I'm starting to accept that I might be doing this alone. Which is fine. I don't need someone who's going to run away every time we have a disagreement. I'll figure it out by myself. And Frank will have to live with the fact that he wasn't there for his own child's birth because he couldn't handle his wife's sense of humor. Yesterday I saw his sister Emma at the grocery store, and she actually had the nerve to look at me like I was some kind of monster. When I tried to talk to her, to explain that this whole thing was just a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion, she literally turned around and walked away from me. His own family is treating me like I'm the villain here. But you know what? I'm done feeling guilty about this. I'm done apologizing for being who I've always been. Frank knew I liked to joke around when he married me. He knew I was spontaneous and unpredictable. If he can't handle that anymore, if he's going to abandon his family over a harmless prank, then that's his problem, not mine. I've got a baby coming and a life to figure out. I don't have time to chase after someone who doesn't want to be here. If Frank wants to throw away 8 years together because he can't take a joke, then good riddance. I deserve better than someone who runs away instead of fighting for our relationship. His loss, honestly. His loss.